common wisdom about the Tea Party movement is that it's the hardliners in the Republican Party and in the conservative movement purging the moderates from their ranks. Out, I say. It turns out the Tea Party putsch is actually about really conservatives trying to take down the people who are really conservatives. The moderates don't even factor in here. Case in point, the soon-to-be ex-chairman of the Florida GOP, Jim Greer, who was Tea Partied right out of a job this week, in a parting diatribe when he left office as the Florida GOP chairman, he went after his Tea Party Republican enemies, saying, quote, "I cannot be a participant in the shredding and tearing of the fabric of the Republican Party. These individuals who have turned their guns on fellow Republicans instead of focusing our efforts on defeating Democrats have done nothing to serve our party." How dangerously moderate is this guy, Jim Greer? Well, having termed President Obama's message to school children last year socialist, Mr. Greer defended himself as follows on Hardball with Chris Matthews.
I don't want them to take their minds away either to push his agenda. When I saw and heard about this speech and saw the lesson plans that the White House was preparing that talked about, what can you say good about President Obama's initiatives, new ideas, things of that nature, that concerned me as a parent, as an American.
That guy, that I don't want Obama to take their minds away guy. He's the guy who's too easygoing and moderate for the Tea Partiers to be the chairman of the Florida Republican Party. Right-wing sights also being set right now on Utah Republican Senator Bob Bennett. Today, the Club for Growth announced that it will oppose Bob Bennett for re-election, even though there's no obvious Republican candidate to run against him. They just want him gone, too. Perhaps it's because of Bob Bennett's horribly moderate agenda, like claiming the #1 assignment of 2009 was to kill Obamacare, complaining that President Obama has had too many czars in his administration, and arguing against creating a consumer financial protection agency because of how much he hates the Environmental Protection Agency. Guy might as well be Chairman Mao, right? Yeah, the purging instinct within Republican circles right now extends even to the crowning event of the conservative political calendar, CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. This year, Sarah Palin turned down an invitation to speak at CPAC. She's instead going to give the keynote at a Tea Party convention. See, because there needs to be a conservative convention that deals with important issues like Obama's birth certificate. Because the regular conservative one that's so extreme it's co-sponsored by the John Birch Society isn't apparently conservative enough. Joining us now is New York Times reporter Mark Leibovich. He's written the cover story about the Tea Party movement in Florida for this Sunday's New York Times Magazine. Mr. Leibovich, thanks very much for coming on the show. It's nice to have you here.
Hi, Rachel. Good to be here.
In your article for the Sunday's Times, you described the just ousted Republican Party chairman as sounding like a harassed substitute teacher getting pelted with spitballs from every direction. And that's in front of a Republican audience. Are Jim Greer and Charlie Crist being attacked for their policies, or is it more complicated than that?
It's certainly more complicated than that, in that I would say this. I mean, people are, I think, right now making the mistake of talking about, quote, the Tea Party movement as sort of a monolithic, kind of singular, group at this point within the I don't know if the Republican Party, but certainly the conservative wing of the Republican Party. I mean, the fact is, no one really knows what they're dealing with the Tea Parties. I mean, right now, some of the Tea Party organizations or actual political action committees are pretty well organized. Some are ragtag, local operations. And the fact is, you can go to two different Tea Parties in various parts of Florida, which I just happen to be focusing on, and find very different characteristics. So having said that, Jim Greer, his remarks this week that you just read were just remarkable, because the degree to which he might have been channeling Charlie Crist, who as a candidate for senator might not be able to say that, something that was sort of in the subtext to everything he was saying. But Jim Greer, as you mentioned, is a very, very conservative guy. Charlie Crist has been known as a moderate over the years, but he is working like the Dickens now to portray himself as the true conservative in the race. And frankly, I don't know if this signifies great energy on the right that everyone should be paying attention to, or frankly, if it signifies a shrinking of the right because of this purge that you're talking about.
One of the things that you describe is sort of a stylistic challenge, more than a policy-based challenge. I mean, after all, right, even though Charlie Crist is conceived of as a moderate in Republican circles, he does support a lot of very conservative policies. You sort of describe him as having the bad luck to not seem stylistically appropriate to the party right now. Is part of the energy behind Marco Rubio, the challenge to Crist, because Rubio just seems like a more combative figure?
I think to a degree, yes, but I also think, I mean, Charlie Crist has more baggage. I mean, I think this is a terrible year to be a familiar face in the political realm, and Charlie Crist has been around Florida for many, many years. He's been in many different jobs, and Marco Rubio is a very he's certainly a very fiery personality. He is someone who gets crowds very excited. But I was actually struck. I mean, I'd heard about him as a real firebrand and someone who has developed a real following, not just in Florida, but across the country at this point, certainly within the conservative movement and within the Tea Party groups. But he's actually pretty conciliatory. He actually has a fairly sheepish manner in his own way. He didn't attack President Obama to the degree to which I thought he would. And he actually, if you listen closely to his words, is actually not that uncomfortable. I wouldn't say, you know, as a compromiser, as a consensus seeker by any means, but someone who is who actually will admit that there are some gray areas in politics. So, but I think his appeal goes a lot deeper than that.
Very briefly, Mark, are you seeing any signs of a counter-revolution? When Jim Greer left with that parting shot at the Tea Partiers, anybody that you met in your reporting in Florida for this story think is going to be cheering him on?
I think there's going to be a silent, I don't know if it's a majority, but there's certainly a group of people within the quote-unquote Republican establishment that Charlie Crist is, I think, banking on to be there for him, you know, 9-10 months from now. But, you know, frankly, right now, the moderate wing of the Republican Party in Florida and across the country is a very, very small group. So, you know, and if they exist at all, they're pretty quiet at this point. So we'll see.
New York Times reporter Mark Leibovich, thanks very much for joining us. Enjoyed your reporting for this piece for the Sunday Times Magazine, and it's nice to have you on the show.
Thanks, Rachel.